also known as the BZA. The board members who will hear your case tonight are, to my right, Mr. Truslow, Mr. Marchant, Mr. Seidel, and Mr. Neal. And to my left, Mr. Jordan should be here shortly. We have Mr. Williams here, and Ms. Switzer Small should be en route as well. I am the chairman for the evening, Ross Nelson. Staff members who are present are Genesis Clark, Josh Downey, and Jenny Working, and we have Kelvin Hugie here, the attorney for the BZA. Because the hearing tonight is a public fact-finding meeting, we are in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act and SC Code 629-70. 15 days prior to this hearing, an announcement was printed in the Post and Courier, a sign was posted on or near the designated property, and a notice was mailed to the applicant or the applicant's representative, to property owners within at least 300 feet of the property, and to parties in interest. Persons, organizations, and the news media that have requested declaration of our meeting have also been notified. Board members, the meeting notes from the August 26, 2024 public hearing were sent to you. Are there any changes? If not, may I have a motion to approve and a second?
Motion.
Second.
And a second. So Mr. Truslow and Mr. Seidel, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Our rulings from this and any BZA meeting are available for public review and inspection during normal business hours at the Charleston County Zoning and Planning Department. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-judicial body that has final decision-making authority on appeals of zoning-related administrative decisions. The BZA is authorized to hear and decide appeals only on zoning-related matters where it is alleged there is an error in any order, requirement, decision, or determination made by an administrative official in the administration or enforcement of any of the zoning-related regulations. A 2/3 vote of the quorum present is required to overturn the decision of the planning director in an appeal. A special exception is an exception issued by the BZA authorizing a particular use in a specified location within a zoning district upon demonstrating that such use complies with all the conditions and standards specified by the Zoning and Land Development Regulations Ordinance, or you'll hear referred to as ZELDAR as we go through the evening. The BZA must find that the special exception request meets all 6 of the approval criteria in the ordinance in order to grant the special exception. A simple majority is required to grant a special exception. A variance is a relaxation by the BZA of the dimensional regulations of the ordinance where such action will not be contrary to the public interest and where, owing to the conditions particular to the property, and not the results and actions of the situation of the applicant, a literal enforcement of this code would result in an unnecessary and undue hardship. And such variance is consistent with Section 629-800 of the Code of Laws of South Carolina, Title VI, Chapter 29. The BZA must find that the variance request meets all 7 of the approval criteria in the ordinance in order to grant the variance. A simple majority is required to grant a variance. Our purpose tonight is for interested parties to be heard in order to assist the board in gathering evidence pertinent to each case. If the members of the BZA feel the need for further information to clarify a case, the board has the authority to subpoena witnesses. It must be understood that the rules of your neighborhood or subdivision are binding and that we can take no action that will negate their jurisdiction over your property. In addition to your testimony, our board has been presented written information submitted to the staff by the applicant or the applicant's agent for each case. This information is now considered to be evidence and is entered into the permanent record of this body. It is assumed that it is complete, true, and accurate. In addition, we have been presented data assembled by the staff for the purpose of clarifying the location and the application's effect on the surrounding property. Our board is empowered to approve with conditions, or deny a special exception or variance request. We are also authorized to defer a case should there be a need to obtain additional information. The BZA's final decision will be mailed within 10 working days of this public hearing. It will be mailed via certified mail to applicants and via U.S. mail to neighbor and community interest notice list. If an applicant's request is approved, the applicant should contact the Charleston County Zoning and Planning Department staff to discuss the next steps in the process. Variances and special exceptions granted this evening are valid for 12 months after this meeting, and a 1-year extension may be granted only if construction or development has commenced or is being diligently pursued. However, if an applicant's request is disapproved and the applicant wishes to appeal the decision of this board concerning the case, appeals must be addressed to the circuit court. SC Code 629-820 states that the appeal must be filed by the applicant within 30 days after the decision of the board is mailed to them. Failure to file an appeal within the time limit deprives the court of jurisdiction to hear the matter. Because this is a quasi-judicial body, everything said in this meeting must be complete, true, and accurate. All of the information provided to the BZA is considered evidence, and the board may certify contempt of circuit court if false statements are made, either in writing or orally. Each person who wishes to address the board will be sworn in by the BZA secretary before they provide testimony or evidence. In order to expedite the procedure, those wishing to speak will please stand up as a group, and Ms. Working will administer the oath.
Okay, you can stand up and raise your right hand. I'm going to say the oath, and you will say, I do. I swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. I do. I do. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now call each case by the case number. Staff will present facts pertinent to the case, limited to 5 minutes. I will then call the applicant. The applicant will stand and state his or her name and current address for the record before presenting testimony pertinent to the case, limited to 5 minutes. I will then ask for all those speaking either in support or in opposition to the case, and they will follow the same procedure for identifying themselves and are limited to 2 minutes each. The applicant will then have a chance to reply to any opposition, again limited to 2 minutes, and then the BZA will make a motion to close the case to the public. Finally, the BZA will make a motion concerning the application, stating specific findings of fact and conclusions of law. Tonight, we will hear 4 new business public hearing cases. Mr. Downing, can you please introduce the first new business case, number BZA 0624-00790?
So, good evening. We'll begin tonight with BZA case 0624-00790. The applicant and property owner, Christian Skolin, is requesting a special exception to establish a short-term rental, extended home rental in the low-density R4 zoning district at 1545 Oak Island Drive, TMS number 32803000031 on James Island in Charleston County. The subject property and properties to the north, east, and west are in the low-density R4 zoning district. The southern portion of the property backs up to the Oak Island Creek. The property contains a single-family residence with 5 bedrooms that was constructed in 1970 per Charleston County records. The applicant would like to rent 5 bedrooms in the single-family residence, and they have shown 7 parking spaces on their site plan. The applicant's letter of intent explains we have a current limited permit. We are requesting an extended permit. We have had the limited permit for a full year at this point. The applicant came before the Board of Zoning Appeals on June 5th, 2023, BZA case 0423-00668 for a special exception for the extended home rental. The application was denied by the BZA because the board found that the application did not meet criteria 1. Please see the BZA final decision orders for further information, or if the board would like, I can read the findings of that decision. What is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Truslow, you had mentioned earlier you had a question about the original findings. Would you
Okay. When I finish the report, I'll answer any questions, but if you wanted me to read the findings,
please?
Yes,
all right.
please.
So let me read the findings. So after hearing the staff report, the applicant presented any public comment concerning the application. The board determined that all items of Article 6.8, the short-term rental, 6.8.2 operating standards and requirements, C special exception of the Charleston County Zoning and Land Development ZLDR had not been satisfied. Mr. Neal made a motion to deny the special exception, stating that it did not meet criteria 1. Mr. Truslow seconded the motion. Mr. Ray, Mr. Marchant, Mr. Neal, and Mr. Seidel and Mr. Truslow voted in favor of the motion. Mr. Jordan, Mr. Nelson, and Mr. Williams voted against the motion. Ms. Switzer Smalls was not present at the meeting. The motion was denied and passed 5-3. Therefore, the motion was disapproved. So staff conducted its site visit on August 23rd, 2023. So staff believes that all three of the criteria for this application may have been met. And I'm getting a little ahead of myself because this is the definitions in our ZLDR for short-term rental, the subject property, the 300-foot radius map, an aerial view of the subject property, and a zoomed-out aerial view of the subject property. Staff conducted its site visit on August the 23rd. So that is pictures of the single-family residence along with the parking, some of the surrounding properties, and Oak Island Drive. This was the submitted site plan and the submitted tenant notice, the plat of the property. So staff believes that all three of the criteria for this application may have been met. So the Board of Zoning Appeals may approve with conditions, or deny BZA case 06-24-00790, the special exception request to establish a short-term rental, extended home rental in the low-density R4 zoning district at 1545 Oak Island Drive, TMS number 328-03-00031 on James Island in Charleston County, based on the BZA's finding of fact, unless the BZA. So the board may approve with conditions, or deny the BZA of the case. In the event that the board decides to approve the case, the board should consider the following recommendations by staff. Prior to the zoning permit approval, the applicant shall complete the limited site plan review process. The use shall comply with all requirements of Article 6.8. The property shall not be used for more than 144 days in aggregate during any calendar year, and the property owner shall be responsible for ensuring that the tenants comply with the Charleston County Noise Ordinance. Staff would like to make the board aware that we have received 29 letters in opposition, and a petition of 70 signatures was signed in opposition of this case. Any questions?
Board, do we have questions for staff? Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two quick questions. One, I'll give them to you both. You can work through them. Are there any other short-term rentals in this subdivision that we are aware of? And my second question is the street that these cars are parked along in the photos that I've reviewed. Do we know if that's a public road or if that's a private road or whatever? So I'd like to know the answers to those.
So both questions. The first question is, there's one permitted short-term rental in this neighborhood.
Extended? Or
one extended home rental, short-term rental in this neighborhood. And secondly, that is a public street.
Public street. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Mr. Truslow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Denny, I'm aware that last year basically this same application was turned down. I understand there were 16 letters in opposition last time, and 29 now. What is different in this application from last year's that was turned down?
Nothing is different in the application other than the applicant waited a year to test out the limited, and now they are trying for the extended. But nothing has changed in like the site plan or anything else. They did have to produce a new BZA application, but the answers were pretty much the same.
Now, I'm not questioning good faith. I just wondered what might have changed. Second thing is I know this is in a residential neighborhood, and my colleague asked if there were other similar rental properties in the neighborhood. Is there anyone where there's one, but is there any that has for 12 guests at any one time?
I'm not sure off the top of my head what the other applications maximum number of guests is. And I don't know if I could find that out before the question period is over, but I do not think it's that high.
This is just one of the few that I don't recall anywhere we've had somebody apply for 12 guests at any one time with at least 7 parking spaces. Is that, do you recall anywhere where there's been an application in a residential neighborhood for?
No, sir, but if I could, that was based off of the accommodations of the size of the home. And so, although we've not seen a number that high, I've also not seen a single-family residence that's come before us that I can think, well, no, that's not true. I can think of another one that is on the end of Soligree that has 5 bedrooms in their request was for 12 guests. So yes, sir, I have seen it. It's not common, but if a single-family residence does have the accommodations for it, that's not something that administratively that we would turn away because their number is high. But they do have that's roughly about 2 or so per bedroom, and then maybe somebody sleeping in the living room. So that's not like an skewed number from what we see.
So to cut to the chase, in this area, there's not one where there's another single-family residence that is proposed to be used for rental purposes with 12 guests
No,
on a
sir.
cul-de-sac.
No, sir.
All right.
Not in
Thank
this
you.
neighborhood.
All right.
No.
I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Quick question. I might have missed it, but how is the parking outside of that residence? Because it's
So-
12 guests.
What they've shown on their site plan is that they have the accommodations for 7 parking spaces. 2 of those parking spaces are within the garage.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Downey, are you aware of and I'm sure we could ask one of the opposing members, but are you aware that this neighborhood has a HOA established?
Yes.
They do. But within the HOA rules, there's nothing in there about short-term rentals?
So before this applicant made a request, staff went all the way down to the Register of Deeds office. I got a copy of the entire restrictive covenants. I took it before our legal department, and our legal department stated that there was nothing in it that specifically stated that short-term rentals were not allowed in this neighborhood.
I had another question, and it just flew out of my brain.
I'll ask a question if it comes.
Yeah,
to
that might help me. Thank you.
Mr. Downey, under the limited home rental that they're currently using, does that allow the 12 guests?
That doesn't have a number of yes, it does. Like the permit application is what the applicant requests. So there's not like a number that staff can say is too much. That's a number that they request. If it is over a certain number, then sprinkler systems would have to be installed through Charleston County Building Services, but that's a safety issue.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, my brain's working again. Thank you. Mr. Downing, are you aware during the 72-day rental time period if there's been any complaints registered with the police or your office? Or
There has not been any complaints registered with our office. I'm not sure if there's been any registered with the Charleston County Police Department.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any additional questions for staff? All right. Thank you, board. That was robust discussion for the early in the process. Is the applicant present? If you would come forward and state your name and address for the record and tell us why we should approve your request.
Up against the line here.
All right, my name is Carrie Brown, and my husband Chris and I are here to request the approval of an extended rental permit for our home at 1545 Oak Island Drive. One thing I wanted to clarify before I got started is that we're requesting for 10 guests, not 12. I'm not quite sure where the 12 is coming from, but we've always done it for 10 guests, just to clarify. As some of you may know, when we requested this permit last year, there were a number of concerns from our neighbors, and so we were advised to begin renting our home solely with the limited rental permit we were originally granted. We're back again this year to make this request for the extended rental permit with 1 year under our belts. We were given the neighborhood comments and concerns for this meeting, and so I just wanted to quickly address these to hopefully build a little more understanding and trust around our request. This home is designated as our primary home, and both my husband and I claim it as such. We pay 4% taxes. I know that was a concern for some. By the end of the year, we will have legally short-term rented our home for the allotted 72 nights. I want to be clear, though, that we absolutely share our home with our friends and family, and I do think that that's causing some confusion for our neighbors. I'm one of 8 kids with family in Nashville, Atlanta, and Charlotte. We also share our home with the headmaster of my daughter's school, the pastor of our church, and in fact, this coming weekend, we'll be sharing it with some friends. Number 3, we long-term rented our home this past winter, which obviously does not count toward that 72-night restriction. Short-term rental sites permit what's called an instant book, where everyone can automatically book a stay. We wanted to be clear that we never allow this for this home. We personally interview every single family looking to rent the home to ensure the right fit for our home and to abide with the concerns expressed by our neighbors last year at this meeting. We not only maintain contact with our tenants throughout their stay, we also have outdoor cameras. So while we set expectations around quiet hours and parking and things like that, we also monitor all exterior activity from these cameras. We did see the picture that one neighbor submitted with the 4 cars parking totally wonky on those gravel spots out front. That was a human error, and it was rectified. Our rules are that 2 cars park in the parallel spots provided in the gravel, and then 1 to 3 cars park in that driveway or in the garage itself. For both long and short-term rentals, we limit to just 10 guests. Number 6, our septic tank has been inspected and serviced over the last year. To our knowledge, it is in working order. And lastly, we are not aware of any registered complaints about the home. We have been in direct contact with both of our immediate neighbors throughout the year. And, while I know there's a difference in opinion tonight around granting this extended rental permit, we've not received a complaint from either of them about the tenants we've had or the management of our home overall. In closing, I know that some will stand this evening in opposition to granting this permit, maybe both out of fear of a potential bigger change in the neighborhood and also about rumors that can swirl amongst neighbors that may or may not be true. We're hopeful that you'll see that we've been responsible in caring for our home and respectful of our neighbors by finding the right tenants to ensure the overall quiet and safety of the neighborhood. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Let's see if any of our board has questions for you. So starting with Mr. Neal.
Mr. Chair, I do have a few, and thank you for clearing up some of the questions we were probably coming at you. I'll take these slow, but they're all pretty easy. So I wanted to confirm there's nothing different. Is there anything different from your previous application over a year ago from this application?
There is not. Oh, there it is.
Easy. That's good. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to follow up on your comment where you said you're not sure where the number 12 came from. I'm looking at the application, and it says on your application maximum number of guests 12. So I would assume that that's where the information is coming from. But tagging with that, I'll let you explain what the difference is of what you're requesting is your request for 10 or 12. But right under that, I notice it says maximum number of nights the short-term rental property is proposed to be rented per year. It says 30 to 60, and by your statement, you just said it's going to be at 72 at the end of the year under the current permit, and you would go longer if it was going to be extended. So could you explain what your difference is on that?
Well, the limited permit only allows 72. So at that time when we had submitted that, that's what our numbers looked like. We will finish this year out with 72.
And you want to explain the difference to the 10 and the 12? Because it says 12 on the application.
That must have been my error. That's
Okay, that's fine. Mistakes happen. I've got 2 other quick ones, Mr. Chair, if I'm allowed.
Sure.
In the public comments, there was a picture or 2 of parking. And obviously, I think last time, but still, parking is always a critical component of the short-term rentals and extended. And if you heard earlier, I asked a question about the street. And from that picture, and I can only go by that one picture, there seems to be parking is not done real well. Now, that could be a one-off case, but I'd hate to see that many bedrooms and that many cars and that many people sticking out in the middle of that road, whether it's public or private. Is there not something we could do to change that or reduce the number? Are you willing to do any of that?
So last year, when we were requested to make sure we had enough parking, we built in these 2 parallel spots so that those 2 cars could go up front. In our communication with that particular tenant, we had said, prioritize, put the cars in the gravel spots, and then use the driveway. They took it as put all the cars in the gravel. So
But I'm not talking about how number of cars, and I'm sorry to interrupt you there. I'm really the way the cars are sticking out into the street more than just
Yes.
parking in the driveway. That just doesn't seem to be a good configuration there.
it's not how it's meant to be. They're just meant to be parallel parked in there, which would make them flush with the street and completely out of the road. Those particular tenants had just misunderstood our direction.
And my last question is, have you reached out to the HOA, the board of the HOA, or this group that has obviously aligned to bring opposition to your application to try to mediate and reduce the number of nights, reduce the number of rooms, reduce the number of parking, anything to give them something that you could have some of these people? I mean, one of my members here, fellow members, made the comment that last time there was 16 letters of opposition and now there's 29 or even more that signed the thing. Is there any way you can address that to see if you can get people on your side versus more people
That's
against
fair.
you?
That's fair. I mean, we focus on our 2 immediate neighbors, who we actually have a great relationship with, regardless of this desire of ours to have this permit. And they've been forthright when we had bamboo coming over into one of their yards. They texted me right away, and we took care of it within the week. So we have a good working relationship with them. Those were the 2 that we really wanted to focus on to make sure that we were in line with them and weren't disturbing them in particular, because to us, those would be the people who would be the most impacted.
So are they here tonight to speak in behalf of you?
Probably, maybe, is Peter? Oh, Peter's not here.
Wait,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, she brought it up. I was just curious to see if those 2 people would be speaking
That's
in her
Peter
favor.
and Susan, and they list feedback as well in there, but they are our neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Mr. Jordan?
When your place is rented and you say you have cameras watching, where are you physically at watching those cameras?
It's all direct through. It's a program called Vivint. There's key codes so you can allow access to a home, as well as you can access any camera at any time, day or night, to see what's going on.
But where will you be at watching?
I'm sorry?
Where will you be watching? What I'm getting at is if camera sees a problem, can you be there in 10 minutes, or are you in Charlotte?
We're 15 minutes away.
That's
Yeah,
what
we
I
live
wanted to hear.
downtown Charleston.
That's what I want to hear.
Thanks.
Any
Thank
other?
you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Hi. Just looking at some of the comments in opposition. My question is, how many different renters do you have during the year? Let's say, like, how many different people do you rent to?
I mean, the rentals would go anywhere between 3 nights to a couple weeks. So it can kind of vary with that.
So how many people would you say you rented to last year, like individual people?
This past year,
Yeah.
so we'll do the 72. Right now, we're at 67, and we
That's
have
nights.
one more booking. I'm
Those are
sorry.
nights. What about people, individuals?
Oh,
I'm just trying to get an idea about, I'm looking at somebody's opposition and, just trying to get an idea.
yeah, I mean,
What's
typically
happening?
it'll be a family or 2 with like nanny, grandma, da-da-da. So we do not allow more than 10 people in the home.
So how many people do you think
How many do I think?
total
Total.
last year?
I might have to get back with you on the numbers on that. So you're asking for
Total number of people you rented out to?
total number?
Stayed there?
Okay, I just don't want to have a totally off number there.
Okay,
But I
thanks.
can get back to you.
Mr. Marchant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand no more than 10 people sleeping in the house. Does that mean that you only have 10 people during the day? I mean, when I'm seeing 6 cars, I mean, do you really have 10 people? Or has it become a place where there's people renting houses in other parts of the area, and then during the day they're hanging out at the house? Could that be a factor, or am I just
Something like that could always be a factor with a rental. That said, as I shared before, we always interview the people who are looking to rent our homes and make sure, like, we do not do bachelorette parties, those kinds of things. We look for people who are coming with their children or with their family, their parents, whatever that looks like. So, we obviously interview those people and make sure that they're the right fit for the home.
Thank you.
I had one follow-up question, and again, thank you for coming. Is the garage, I know you have a garage, is that available for the rental guests, or is it packed? Is it like many garages, is it packed so nobody really uses it? What?
But both
Can you
sides
help
are
me?
available to park in.
Okay.
All right, do we have any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you, Mrs. Brown.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone else to speak in favor? All right, do we have anyone here to speak in opposition to this application? All right, I saw the gentleman in the green shirt raise his hand first. If you would come forward and state your name and address for the record and tell us why we should not approve this application.
My name is Skip Carson. I live at 1552 Oak Island Drive. Excuse me. I'm a little confused with what they're saying. If you could put up the tenant drawing that was one of the slides, it shows 7 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. So I don't know where the 5 bedroom thing comes from. I'm also a little confused as that they say it's their primary residence, and yet they're asking to rent it out for 144 days of the year. And if it is their primary residence, where do they put their stuff when they leave and the guests are coming in? I think those are the big things. If you look at their posting on the unit in the comments, the people were talking about a family of 4, a family of 8, a family of 4 plus 3, a family with their dog. I mean, there are a lot of people coming in and out of there. I think that's our primary concern. When my wife and I bought our house 10 years ago, we were looking for a single-family house. I wanted to be on the water, but we also wanted to be in a quiet residential area. So we're at basically 5 houses from the end of a dead-end street. And now all of a sudden we've got 10, 12 people and all their cars coming back and forth. So it's a little concerning as to the traffic on the street. And then in closing, the gentleman from the staff said that he had looked at the covenants. Well, if he would read number 2, and I could read the whole thing to you, you all could look at it, but the center of it basically says, and specifically, the use of any building on any lot or the use of any lot for business or for building and residential purposes, for business or combined business and residential, is prohibited. So I may not be a lawyer, maybe I don't understand the terminology, but it seems to me if the county is requiring them to have a business license, then they're operating a business which is against the rules of our subdivision, our neighborhood. Thank you.
Mr. Carson, stay up here, please. Board members, Mr. Neal?
Could you pull up the slide that has the plat that shows the subject property? And then Mr. Carson mentioned what address he is. Mr. Carson, we're looking at it down here as well.
Right.
Could you show us which lot you live
Sure,
in?
if
And then
you
I
could-
have a question based on
Right,
your proximity.
Okay, I'm across the street and 2 lots up, going towards Folly Road.
Where he's got the red marker?
Yes, sir.
All right, so then you would be someone that could give us some good understanding into the parking situation. And my question, which was based on the private road or public road or whatever it is that that thoroughfare, when there's that many cars parked out and extending into the street, is that causing any traffic issues or safety issues in your opinion?
I'm not sure I can honestly answer that, because when
That's
we
fair.
leave our house, we turn to the right going towards Folly Road, so I don't drive by their house.
Very fair. Thank you, Thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Chair.
All right, do we have any other questions for Mr. Carson? All right, Mr. Marchant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Carson, I'm going to pick on you because you're first, so I apologize. But the HOA agreement is an important document in terms of creating rules and regulations by which we can judge or not judge fairness. And I'm just kind of curious, and I'm sure Mr. Downey's probably going to comment around what quote business means, but from his legal counsel. But I'm just curious, why is your neighborhood not just revised your bylaws to say no short-term rentals allowed, to make it clear? Because for us, we're judging against 3 criteria that are created through Zeldar, and it's pretty cut and dry in that case. But so could you talk about that, or talk about any process you may be in for that?
After the meeting last year, some of us stood on the sidewalk and said, maybe it's time to redo our bylaws and put that clearly in them. We have not done that. Once again, probably it's time we should. But it seems clear that, or at least me, that a business is a business. If you have a business license and you're collecting money for what you're doing, then you're going against the regulations. I mean, I don't think that maybe should be the only thing we hang our hat on, but I think that any of you or anyone here who has bought a house in a residential area doesn't then expect that a few years later your neighbor is going to be renting it out to 12 people and renting it out according to what they want 144 days a year.
I appreciate that. I think the legal definition of what business means would probably be helpful for the board. I mean, one could argue if you're an accountant and you're working out of your garage, you're doing business, but it's still a house. And so we see this a lot in overlay zones. It's still zoned R4 or R2 or whatever, but it's not. It can be used for certain type of business. But I'll let the lawyers and the staff sort of make that determination for us. I'm just sort of curious to make it easier for boards like ours. If you have clarity in your language, it gives us a lot more clarity.
My guess would be that you all don't like to be doing this.
No comment.
We hear a lot of cases for extended home rentals. It takes up a little bit of time. Mr. Williams, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you explain, because we have to go back to these 3 criteria once again. Last year, it was declined based on criteria 1, so I'm just curious as to like the street that goes past your house. Can you tell me about that street? Is it how many lanes and what?
It's, I guess, 2 lanes. There's no center line or anything. It generally does not have much traffic.
Is it a dirt road or asphalt or what?
Pardon?
Paved road?
Yes, it's paved.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Carson? All right. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
It's in the opposition.
Okay.
Pictures in the opposition.
What's that?
So the picture is in the picture of the drive of that road is in the opposition letter. Sorry.
All right. Please state your name and address for the record. You can pull the mic down.
Good evening, board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Patricia Ramasiati, and I own 1574 Oak Island Drive. I am here to urge you to please deny this application for the extended home rental permit. And my reason is overall pretty simple. Oak Island is a very special neighborhood. It's like living in a National Geographic episode every day, and it's a little slice of paradise just down the street from the party of Folly Beach. Of the just under 80 homes, I can tell you the names, basic life stories, where their kids go to school, the dog names, of who lives in 75 of those homes. We're a true community. And it's not just me who thinks this. Allow me to quote directly from the Airbnb reviews from the property in question. The location was extraordinary, very quiet neighborhood. The neighborhood is delightful. We love taking our dogs for walks and chatting with the neighbors. You feel like you are in your own little oasis. The location was nice, quiet neighborhood. So I ask you, board, does it seem fair that one of the greatest assets of this property is us, the neighborhood? That we are a big part of what he is selling, while he is simultaneously contributing to changing the character of that neighborhood? And please note that while we are fiercely united and protected bunch, we are also a very much live and let live kind of neighborhood. There are all sorts of aesthetic oddities going on that we just don't care about. None of us are interested in policing the activities of this rental, and I will be the first one to admit to you that with the property having a limited permit, being able to rent for 72 nights a year, things are working out reasonably well. We don't bother the county with complaints because right now, we feel the situation is a healthy, tolerable compromise. Last year when we came here, we didn't want them to be granted a permit. They weren't. We were very satisfied, and therefore, we lived and let lived. And that's why you don't have all these complaints happening, because we were satisfied with the outcome and we're not looking to be nitpicky and meddlesome. A few months ago, you had a hearing for one of our neighbors. I think they needed a variance for one of their sheds or something. You didn't see this kind of outcry. You didn't have 29 letters in opposition. We don't worry about the things that don't matter to us. And when we gathered here last year, Mr. Skoland spoke to the board, and he was pretty ambivalent about getting the permit. I'm going to paraphrase him, but he was like, it'd be great if we got it. Doesn't matter too much if we didn't. I've got all my other properties. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with the property. We may live there, we may not live there. And I left the hearing with an overall feeling of, if us, the neighborhood, is this passionate about him not having the permit, and he's that ambivalent about having it, how is there even a debate happening here?
All right, Ms. Razziotti, your 2 minutes is up, so let me see if any board members have questions for you.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you so much. Well, I will ask you one
Sure.
question. Have you experienced any detrimental impacts to your property or had any bad interactions with the guests at this particular piece of property?
I would say just the increase in traffic. As pointed out, it's usually very, very quiet. And I live close to the end of the street, and when I face the front, I can see almost all the cars that go by day and night. And I can tell you when I see, because it's about I think half a mile from Folly Road to the end. So when I see the cars going by at 40, 50 miles an hour, I know it's because they know they turned left onto our street. They've got a half a mile to go to this rental. They're going.
Thank you.
I do have a follow-up.
All right, Mr. New.
Yes, so in your opinion, you think it's a fair compromise to do the 72, the limited rental, but you think it would greatly impact the neighborhood if we allowed the extended application for 144?
Correct.
That's your overall statement, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you for your time this evening. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition to this application? Please state your name and address for the record and tell.
Paul Hayward Davis at 2321 Swordfish Circle. I'm right in the middle of the neighborhood. Just a couple of things, beautifully done. I, like most of us, thought we had a great compromise last time. Seemed fair. Once again, we're not people who want to get in somebody's way. I own 4 pieces of property. I own the last lot out there on Oak. I stand to really gain by short-term rental because nothing sells at the beach now because the short-term rental fight's going on. Our biggest concern is once you open the door, then people start coming. This is a residential neighborhood. You were asking about the road. It's just a daggone straight up the road they finally paved last year after the first time in 20 years. There's really a place and a half to get by. You have to kind of pull over the side of the road to let your neighbor by. Everybody knows everybody. We're fine with them being there. I think they did a beautiful job on the house. Spent a lot of money, but a beautiful job. The issue is that there's a couple of, and the main thing is this. Can't be the primary residence. I just want everybody to be honest and fair. 72 days, you can't stay out of the house. I've been kicked out twice for a month. You can't do it that way. It doesn't work. So trust me, 72 days is a lot of time. The other thing is the beach, because the beach rentals aren't selling. because of short term. They're moving over our way. We start doing this, we have an issue. The HOA y'all are talking about is at the very front of the neighborhood. There are condos at the very front. There's one street at the front which came in as an HOA, which we had no problem with. Again, I don't think anybody complained about it because it was the very front of the street. This is at the very back. And your question earlier, how many people you think you had? Well, I'm Charleston math, but let's say they had 10 people in the house, 72 days, should be a little over 714. So let's just say it's 500 people. That's 500 people that are in and out of our neighborhood that to just come in and out, we'd rather not see it get started. Because once it gets started, it's going to keep going. Okay? Question?
All right. Well, Mr. Davis, thank you for your comments. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Davis? I do want to follow up. You said there's no HOA for your portion of the neighborhood, or there is an HOA?
No, there's at the very front of the neighborhood, there's an L-shaped condo that's right there on the street. And then I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe that the street on the other side of that one street right there has some HOA. I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay.
But, again, we just know all the neighbors have a great time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition? Okay, we'll start with the first of this row, the lady beside Ms. Raziati. Or you go ahead and come forward. You're coming up. Yep.
Hey, thank y'all. Kim Morganello, 1620 Oak Island. I will not take the whole 2 minutes. I'll just say I am opposed. I have a person who lives in my house that's this tall and this tall, so an 8 and a 4-year-old who are out on the street all the time, skating, scooting, doing whatever, and every single time somebody comes down that street too fast, it's somebody with out-of-state plates. I'm assuming, they've got to go, everybody's stated they've got to go all the way to the end of the street. They're going to this rental. We've already talked about the number of cars that are coming there. We as neighbors always slow down for each other. 25 miles per hour is fast on our street. So if somebody comes down at 40 miles per hour, and this isn't me sitting up on the porch, watching them go by. This is me on the street with my kids, and they're coming through there. That is something that is very concerning. Septic tank, I get it. I mean, it's apparently sized to 5 bedrooms. Now we got the 7-bedroom in question. The number of people who are coming and going. This is a very sensitive place. It is surrounded by shellfish beds, tidal creek. I've been by there and seen the crab trap completely out of water. We call that ghost fishing. I just don't think it's a very good stewardship move to our salt marsh and our tidal creek system that is very sensitive. And the last thing I'll say is that the parking, I don't think the on-street parking is very well designed because there's always rocks out on the street. We have to turn around before we get down there when we're in our scooters and roller skates and whatnot. So that's sort of an aside. But this is not in character with the rest of our neighborhood that's so special. And the only other STR is actually attached to owner-occupied, which this clearly isn't since it was stated that they live in downtown Charleston.
All right. Holden, are there any questions? All right. Thank you very much. All right. Who is next to speak tonight?
I'm Christy Brown. I live at 2323 Flying Fish Circle, which is a little bit towards the front. So our neighborhood, all of about 70 homes in the neighborhood are owner-occupied primary residences, which is like 98%. Only one of them, like she mentioned, has some kind of rental associated with it and is a primary residence. They're renting out rooms. So we really only have one other that's a long-term rental. We just don't have rentals in our neighborhood. It's generationally owned. We have families that pass their houses down. So to have a rental in our neighborhood is a little bit, anyway. We also, I know that they've said, oh, we've got lots of friends. It's friends that are staying. It's family members that are staying. And rules-wise, I guess that's okay. You guys aren't going to get any payment for it. But because there's no regulation, you don't have like monthly reports from them that are due on who's staying and how many nights they're staying and all of that. It becomes like self-regulation for us, and we're not the kind of neighborhood to do that. But it also becomes a situation where all they have to do is turn in 72 days and say, well, the rest of the time, sure, there were people there, but it was family. So without that kind of protection of that constant regulation, it's kind of pointless to regulate 72 days. So for me, unless we have some kind of way to monitor this on a monthly basis, like if you know how many days you have rented currently today, I mean, I could tell you they've got 22 days left that are already booked for the rest of the year, and that's really all I can tell. Could be more, though, because they're on Zillow, VRBO, and Airbnb, and it's just not consistent what they're doing. So in my mind, without regulation, number two, they're not being honest about the number of bedrooms that they're renting, because according to the rules that I understand,
All right, Ms.
you have a
Brown.
10 number limit, right?
Ms. Brown, we have 2 minutes, so your 2 minutes are up, so let me see if the board has any
Well, they're
questions for
renting
you.
for more than 10 people. It's very
Ms.
clear
Brown?
on the
Ms.
website
Brown?
in the
Ms. Brown,
in the
your
comments.
2 minutes is up. Let me see if you have questions. Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll follow up on the comment about the 72 nights versus the friends and family that are not included in this, that don't have to pay anything. And that's something that obviously the county or this board clearly will not regulate. That's up to the staff and business licenses. But I was wondering if the HOA is going to have discussions about changing or modifying their HOA rules and regulations down the road. Maybe the HOA would entertain something or reaching out to the homeowner saying, if you are going to operate a short-term rental under the limited version or the extended version, you have to give us a calendar and you have to monitor which days are going to be rented and which days are not going to be rented over the next quarter or something like that. That might be something for the HOA to involve. I keep hearing everybody saying they don't want to get involved, but at the same time, it's affecting your livelihood out there, or at least it sounds like we're getting statements to that. Is that something that y'all would entertain or want to work with the homeowner
If we have
on?
to entertain it. But I was always under the assumption that if you were going to set permits and limits and things like that as a government, there would be some sort of way to enforce that. But if there is no enforcement, it just kind of becomes a way for you guys to collect permit money, and for us to have to enforce it, it doesn't really seem fair to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I would say that staff would be responsible for enforcing that, and that would have to be a complaint that you guys, not that I want to give staff more work to do, but
Exactly.
that would have to be something that you would, a complaint you would make to those guys that they would have to follow up on.
And my understanding is that used to be through the police, but that seems to have changed because that's all been marked out in the rules now.
I hate to interrupt during the question session. However, staff does have ways of monitoring how many days the property has been used for short-term rental, along with collecting that information from the Revenue Collections Department. I would like to say to those who are in the public who are in opposition, if you have complaints, please dial our office number and dial extension 6. That rings my phone directly, and I will be in contact to answer any questions regarding short-term rentals.
Thank you, Mr. Downey.
I had
Mr. Truslow?
question. I would like, thank you for coming. I would like you to have an opportunity to explain why you know how many, the application is for 12, what's in writing, but how do you know how many people are there as rental guests?
If you read the reviews, they'll tell you. Like Leanne stayed in June and she had 11 people in there. So it's not like if you read the reviews, you really have to like read the comments, because it's not like something where they have to say number of guests, how many days did you stay? It's not like you really have to read them and see. But yeah, they're definitely having more than 10 people stay, and they're definitely advertising more than 5 bedrooms, which my understanding was that no more than 5 bedrooms, 10 people. Of course, you can have kids under 5, but that was the limit for this type of permit.
Anything else, or is that it?
I think
Thank you.
I mean, I can keep going if you
No.
Do we have any other questions
They
for Ms.
have a
Brown?
saying sometimes in sales, if when it's sold, quit selling.
done.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Yeah.
Hi, Tammy Bird, 1648 Oak Island Drive, and I live more toward the front of the neighborhood. I can tell you that when they have a lot of guests, I walk every morning and usually every afternoon, and the cars are flying down the road. By the time they get to the front of the neighborhood, they're going 40 to 50 miles an hour. I have directly talked to some of their guests as they're leaving, and when I get ready to walk, they are flying out of the neighborhood. So I can attest to that personally because I've seen it happen. I also sent in copies of ads. None of the ones they've talked about. I found 5 different ads on Tulia, Hot Pads, Redfin, and others that y'all should have a copy of. I sent them in. Their application states 5 bedrooms. Every one of the ads has 7 bedrooms being advertised for rent. So if you look at that, that's going directly against what they have put in their application. I can also speak for their next door neighbors, the Gerards, who have written in opposition to this because they don't want this happening in the house next to them. I turned in the petition with the signatures. We have a few more signatures. We have over 46 homes on the street that have signed in opposition to the extended term. And that's basically it. I would like to see it monitored more closely because I do think it's being rented more than what they are saying it is. And I do know they're advertising for 7 bedrooms in all of the ads. Thank you.
Well, hold one second. Do we have any questions for Mr. Neal? You have a question for Ms. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this is the petition?
Yes.
So are you the person that submitted the public comment with all the pictures and the snapshots of the VRBO and stuff like
Yes.
that? So if I'm looking at, I don't know if we can pull it up or not, but I'm looking at, I don't know which site this is from, if it's from VRBO or Zumper. I don't know what Zumper
Yeah,
is.
there's Zumper, Redfin.
So I'm looking at the Zumper picture, and under the public opposition comments, there's clearly a page on Zumper that says 7 bedrooms for rent.
Yes, every single one of the ads had 7 bedrooms. And I sent 5 different ones that were all different from the Airbnb and the Zillow. So all 5 of them said 7 bedrooms for rent.
Thank you very much for setting that straight.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Neal? No. No more questions from the board. Do we have anyone else to speak in opposition? Please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Patton. I live at 2319 Bluefish Circle. So I live the cul-de-sac just a few rows down. I could echo what Mrs. Morganello said with respect to her children. I have 2 small children as well who play in the street and can often be found playing with Kim's children. And because we live in a quiet residential neighborhood, they can walk back and forth to the houses and roller skate, and they have lemonade stands. You will also note, however, Kim mentioned, every time we see speeding on our street, there are out-of-state plates on the car. It is very easy to tell who does not live in the neighborhood. They go flying down the street. It's incredibly dangerous. I would note I moved to this neighborhood a few years ago from the Cannonboro-Elliottboro neighborhood in downtown Charleston. I'm sure y'all are very familiar with the short-term rental rules there. My husband and I and our family moved to this neighborhood in no small part because there were no short-term rentals. Short-term rentals in downtown and Cannonboro-Elliottboro were an absolute nightmare. I would note if you look on the Zillow listing for this property, it's maintained by Stay Duvet or Duvet, whatever they call themselves now. This is the same company that owned all or managed all the rentals around my home when I lived in downtown. And one of the reasons we left was because on a daily basis, I was having to call the police to shut down parties. I had multiple conversations with the manager of that company who assured me over and over again they had noise requirements and all kinds of special bells and whistles installed in the house to make sure everything stayed quiet. Nevertheless, things went the way they did, and it was a nightly problem. I respectfully request that the board note this is an exemption that they are requesting. The rule is the rule for a reason. This is only one in a neighborhood of many, and one of the first questions that was asked when the petitioner came up was, how many other homes in this neighborhood have this same kind of rental? We don't have any occupied by persons who are non-residents. There's a reason for that. It's an exemption, it's not mandatory, it's not required, and under the statute, I believe it's section 16.8.2, it would have a significant detrimental impact on the neighborhood, and it is not. It is not conducive or consistent with the use of the other properties in our neighborhood.
All right, Ms. Patton,
Yes,
2
sir.
minutes is up, so let me see if the board has questions
Appreciate
for
your.
you. Mr. Jordan?
Would you agree what I think I heard your neighbor say a few minutes ago, that within the last year, there's not been many issues, if any?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, sir?
I believe I heard your neighbor say a minute ago that during the last year, there's not been any issues.
As far as speeding on the street, I would note that there have been multiple occasions where we've had out-of-state tags speeding down Oak Island Boulevard. Since we know everyone who lives on Oak Island, and none of them have out-of-state tags to my knowledge, the only persons that I could imagine with someone lurking around the neighborhood are going to stay at the short-term rental.
And also during this past year, have you had to call the police for any reason?
I have not called the police this past year, no, sir.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Patton? All right, thank you so much for your
Thank you for
testimony.
your time.
Yes, ma'am, please come forward.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Dr. Anatoline. I own 1548 Oak Island Drive, Charleston. I live across the street from the rental being discussed. I'm here to communicate my opposition to expanding the rental days to beyond the currently approved 72 days at 1545 Oak Island Drive. My opposition to this increase in rental is based on several factors. The renovations to the house are designed to accommodate at least up to 12 people, but there is no change in the septic system to accommodate this. Even if they run up to 10 adults, this is extreme. We are, as you know, experiencing higher than average rain events. This will continue. This impacts the output of the septic systems in our creeks, which are only several feet from the system. As a professional marine ecologist, I can tell you that the increase in input of septic waste into our creek systems impacts not only our fish and wildlife, but our quality of life. Due to the large number of renters at a time, there are often 5 or more cars in the driveway and on the street. This has at times made it difficult for myself and other neighbors to navigate out of our driveways. I don't think both spaces are available in the garage for renters. I think one is available. Because of the large number of residents in the rental, there are up to 4 garbage cans out in front of the house for several days. Most of us pull ours in the same day because the owner doesn't live in the residence. He's not there to pull them in. There's no one at the house to alert when there's something wrong, and the renters have no reason to care. If the lights are blinking, if someone's walking around, there's no way to, we don't know them. We're taking the time to come tonight because we care about our neighborhood. We have left work, or left our kids, left our dinner tables to come out, as have you, by the way. As you know, we did this last year. Our concerns haven't changed. Our neighborhood is quiet and occupied by families. Many of these families have pets and small children. Many are elderly. Some residents are children with special needs that live just a few houses away. Any point in the day, you can find someone walking their kids and pets. They ride their skateboards and their bikes. We don't have sidewalks. I think our neighborhood represents what I consider traditional, and you know this in Article 681, Section 681 of the Zoning Development Regulations states, county is committed to working to protect the traditional quality of life and character of its residential neighborhoods. County has concerns about permitted short-term rental resulting in increased traffic noise, trash, parking needs, safety, and possible adverse impacts and other undesirable characters to the nature of the county's neighborhoods. I'm asking that you consider this as you make your determination. I don't like the fact that I now live across from rental, but I've been tolerant of the increased impact to our great neighborhood.
All right,
I ask that you at least allow
the
us to
2
continue
minutes.
and not take away what it has to offer. Thank you for our time.
All right, thank you. Hold 1 second. Mr. Neal, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll let her sum up by addressing my question. My question is, are you, or do you have a difference of opinion with one of the earlier speakers in opposition that you are basically fine with the current limit of 72, but you believe it would be greatly adversely affect your neighborhood if it went to the 144?
I think our neighborhood would greatly be impacted if you go to the 144.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
All right, there any other questions for the speaker? All right, thank you for your time this evening. All right, do we have anyone else to speak in opposition to this application? Do you have new testimony to present?
Yeah, I just have one fact to add to it. You want me to?
Were you sworn in?
Pardon, I'm good.
Were you sworn in earlier?
No, I was not.
All right. Ms. Working, could you please step forward? Please provide new testimony, and if you're going to come forward.
I swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth. I do. On the parking.
All
in
right,
the-
state your name and address for the record
Scott
first.
Brown, 2323 Flying Fish Circle. As far as the parking in the garage and the Airbnb pictures, there's a huge sauna that's been built in one of those garage parking spaces. So I don't know how both of those are available to cars.
I believe you said that it appears there's only one space available
Yeah,
within the
not the
garage
two
for
that they
parking.
stated.
Okay. There's a photo in the package that shows that it would be impossible to park two cars in the garage.
There's a sauna and some workout equipment in one of the garage spaces. Yeah.
I didn't know what he said. Yeah, I couldn't understand. Thank you.
All right.
Well,
Any
I
other
guess, Mr.
any
Chairman.
other questions? All right. Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else to speak in opposition to this application? All right. Mrs. Brown, you have the right to rebut. We will give you plenty of time to address the issues that have been raised.
Just want to share that, when we first went to purchase this home and we're looking at options, we do live downtown Charleston, but we wanted to be able to enjoy, one of the beach cities. And so we looked at that property and we felt like it was a great fit for what we were looking to do, which would be to be able to enjoy the property, but also be able to rent it out. I hate that it's causing angst for them. Sorry. So that, I just want you guys to know that that's not our intention at all. We're just trying to enjoy the property as well the way we can, and we do see it as an opportunity to have this extended rental permit. To address a couple of things they shared, the 7-bedroom thing. So the house does have 7 bedrooms in it, but per last year when we all met, 5 bedrooms is the limit for short-term rental based on the septic that it has and everything else. And so that is what it is listed on short-term sites. Now, we have worked with Stay Duvet, which is a reputable agency here in Charleston. They list it as a 7-bedroom for long-term, 30 days or more, which my understanding is that we are allowed to do that without restriction. So that's where, if you go to any of those funny, I didn't hear the name of it, I think it started with a Z, a couple other ones, they list it as a 7-bedroom because that's for long-term. Short-term is always listed 5 if you look at Airbnb or VRBO. Someone mentioned Leanne, the renter that we had. Leanne had 3 extras. Those 3 extras were dogs. We take a security deposit for dogs, and we do allow dogs in the property, so I just wanted to clarify that. 2 spots inside the garage. Yes, there's a sauna built as a portion of the garage, but you could pull in 1 normal car and 1 smaller car in there. That said, we also have 5 spaces in the driveway and 2 ancillary spaces, so there is plenty of parking there on the property. Let's see. I think that is it. The other items, we'd have to, work through. So happy to answer the questions.
All right, board, do we have questions for Ms. Brown? Mr. March. No, Mr. Williams, we'll start with you.
Just want to give you a chance to speak to why you were denied last year, as you've come back from last
Sure.
year.
Yeah, last year, and some of you all were here, we presented our case, and our neighbors stood up and opposed, and they actually left it where we were able to either kind of try to push it more and wait for a decision, or just decide on that day. And after hearing the neighbors, we decided, let's just forego pushing it anymore. Let's just try to prove ourselves. Let's try to take care of the property, be responsible, get the right renters in there, all that stuff, so that we're set up for success next year. So that's where we were coming from with that.
Well, just as far as the criteria, it talks about the fact that you have to be compatible with existing uses in the vicinity and not affecting the neighborhood. Just want to give you a chance to speak to that.
Sure. Our understanding is that it is permissible, and there is another one on the block that is there. And so, we wouldn't be here today if we didn't understand that there would be opportunity to be able to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You heard the testimony of numerous residents, your fellow neighbors, that basically have said that they felt it was a fair compromise for you to stay at 72. I think there would probably, if you took a poll, there'd probably be a lot of votes that they didn't want you to do 72 days. But it sounds like they're very reasonable folks over there, and they want to keep it at 72. And yet every one of them has testified, and they've gone from 16 in opposition last year to 29 or whatever the number is this year. So it's almost doubled. I mean, do you understand the enormity of this impact, which is our number one criteria? I mean, can you address that? I understand that you wanted to wait a year and see if it got better. Well, you're coming in and saying, hey, nobody yelled, so it is better. But twice the number of people are here to say, we don't want it. So how can you address that? How can you address that with your neighbors to
Sure.
explain to us to get past that criteria?
I understand where they're coming from. They are the same arguments as last year. We were hopeful this year to have proven ourselves, to have, again, chosen the right, set up the home properly with parking, with the right tenants, et cetera, to make it, to prove ourselves to be able to do this. Small pieces of feedback that they shared over the course of this last bit of time are things that we could actually fix too. The gravel mentioned going into the public street. I get that. I kind of get annoyed by it too. We could figure out a solution for something like that. So if we have feedback from neighbors, we can make changes there too. We're not stubborn people. We're happy to figure out solutions for things if we're given that feedback. And to this point, we hadn't gotten any official complaints, and so we can only go with what information we have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. I'm sorry, we can't take questions from the crowd. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Jordan.
Two things. You mentioned there's another rental down the street. Did you own your property when that one was changed to rental?
That other people would know better than I, but that was before us. And so that's why, in part, we thought we'd be able to do something like this, was because it had been permitted before. Someone back here may be able to answer that better.
You didn't own nothing then?
I'm sorry?
You didn't own anything there then?
No, we didn't own anything there then.
And the second thing is, to my colleagues, since you heard her mention they're willing to work on this and try to make amends, does that make this a candidate for one of these things that we do sometimes, to send it back to the staff? Yes.
Possibly.
You know what that means?
No, sir.
Would you please explain?
Mr. Jordan is suggesting that one of the options you have is to defer this decision to a later date. If you feel the decision might not be in your best interest that the board might reach tonight, if you want to spend more time with your neighbors, you have an option to ask us to defer this decision and come back in a month or 2 months to represent your case.
And I say that, but based on what you just said, that you would be willing to work on some of this stuff.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you so much for your testimony this evening.
Thank
All right.
you.
Does she have to tell us or ask us?
If she would like to defer, she would have had to ask.
Well, does she know that, though? Does she know she has to ask?
Mr. Jordan would like to know if you would like to defer the case or if you would like for us to render a decision tonight.
She may not know that.
Okay, thank you. All right. This case is closed to the public. Board, do you have any other questions of staff?
Staff does have some comments for some information that was brought up
After
tonight.
the lashing.
The last week.
Hear from Mr. Downing.
All right. I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. So, to Mr. Jordan's last question, the other short-term rental that was approved in this neighborhood was approved before the Scolins purchased this home. The other home has 8 Their maximum number of guests are 8, and they are owner occupied. Although a business license is required under the zoning and land regulations ordinance for properties that are zoned R4, short-term rentals are considered a residential use and not a commercial use. Although it does require a business license, in this case, it is considered a residential use. Something did come up with the property not being a part of the HOA. According to the deed that was produced that the staff found, this property is under that HOA. One of the concerns by the community was that how do we track the number of days? We do have a permitting software that helps us track how many number of days that the property has been used. And staff is not shy of community help if there is a problem with
Excess
the
rentals.
short-term rental in the neighborhood. Please dial our direct number and dial extension 6. Lastly, something that the board should consider, parking calculations are 9 feet by 18 feet. All parking requirements are 9 feet by 18 feet. And then last, the applicants produce to staff what their maximum number of bedrooms is to be, along with their number of guests, and then that's where staff produces like a ratio to make sure that their number of guests and their number of bedrooms aren't outweighing each other in a ratio sense. I hope that answers any of the things that came up. Are there any questions further of staff?
Yeah, right here.
Mr. Williams?
Since you're answering questions, the issue came up of the septic system versus the allowable amount of rooms. Is that a rule?
So when the property was renovated, if proper permits were, I do not remember, I did not work on this renovation portion of it, but if the number of bedrooms exceeded what the septic system could hold, that would have been flagged.
Within the building department.
Within
correct?
the building department, yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Downey? Mr. Downey, thank you so much for proactively answering questions as they may
I
have
got carpal
arisen.
tunnel from writing so much during the.
All right. Well, with no other questions for staff, we can entertain a motion and a discussion. Mr. Neal.
Mr. Chair, after hearing all of the testimony and a good testimony from the applicant and explaining it, I just feel that I don't see how this application and the evidence presented tonight will meet criteria 1, which is our golden rule of the 3, is compatible with existing uses in the vicinity and will not adversely affect the general welfare or character of the immediate community. So I'm going to make a motion to deny this application. I don't know where we'll go with it, but I'm going to make the motion to deny it based on the testimony that it does not meet criteria number 1. We had numerous speakers along with the petition, along with the speakers tonight that basically said the increase of going from the limited status to the extended stay will greatly harm this community. And I've got to just stand with the community on that one. So we'll see where we go from there.
All right. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. I'm going to recognize Mr. Williams with the second. All right. We have a motion that has been properly moved and seconded. Do we have any discussion?
I would note that this is the most number, since I've been on this board, this is the most objections that I've observed in a case of this type. It's almost unprecedented. I remember we had a mining case that was hotly contested in Allendale, but of a residential neighborhood rental, this is the most community activity that we've had. And somebody said the rule is the rule. This is governed by Article 6 of Zelda. This is a special exception request, and I would, for that reason, I've seconded the motion.
Okay. All right. Well, I recognize Mr. Williams with the second, but your comment is duly noted.
I'll just say why I seconded it, and that's mainly for the public good, and not so much the number of people, but I think they made a good case as to why it's not in in line with the public good of that neighborhood. So that's why I agree.
All right, Mr. Marchant?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. One of the things I struggle with this case is the opportunity for an applicant to prove themselves in a very positive way without complaint, and also the compelling testimony of one of the public comments around that this is truly an exception. And to the degree the board believes in kind of approving an exception over something that's going to have a detriment to the community, I thought was a compelling part to, or maybe antidote to the applicant proving themselves through 72 days. So I support the motion as well, but it's a tough one because there's this sort of tension between doing good work and being a good neighbor, and also understanding the community can see the sort of water over the waterfall, with an exception. And I think the term exception is what really rang in my head tonight. So I thank the public comments for that.
Mr. Neal?
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on Mr. Marchant's comment. I agree. This is a struggle. I don't want this to sound like I'm completely against short-term rentals or anything, but I think the solution and the criteria that we have to meet is clear. And I couldn't get past the threshold of number one. But I think there might be a solution out there that doesn't involve the county board here. It involves the HOA. Maybe somebody should spearhead an effort in this community of saying exactly what they want to allow, and let the communities do it. We'd much rather see the communities handle their issues before they come here. And that's one of the rules is if it's against the community, then we don't even have to hear it. But if it's not handled in the community, then we got to sit here and make these tough calls. And every single case is a very, very tough call because it's financial, it's livability, it's financial for a homeowner, it's financial for the neighbor. So I understand you and I feel for you, but the community here has spoken in my rules that we have to follow. So maybe there's a solution down the road that you can work something out that everybody can buy into, and it's a solution for everybody, and then you wouldn't have to need us. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Neal. I would add to it, I do live in a neighborhood where we engage in regular bylaw reviews, and our neighborhood specifically does not allow extended any kind of vacation rentals or weekly short-term rentals. And I would encourage the neighborhood to engage in a regular review of bylaws in order to clarify this situation before they even arise. I think the board really had some other options we could have employed. I'm not necessarily opposed to the motion, but I would remind the board that we don't necessarily have to approve all 144 days in the future. That is always an option as well. But be that as it may, we shall now call for a vote. And so all those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? I'll be opposed. All right, we had two opposed. The motion to deny carries. Unfortunately, your application has been denied. Staff will be in touch with you with the next steps in the process if you choose to appeal or whatever your decision is from there. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the community showing up, supporting. I know it's a tough on everybody to take time out to drive out to Leeds Avenue for these events. All right, we are going to take a short recess because that was an unusually long hearing for an extended home rental, and we shall reconvene in 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, it hadn't been quite 10 minutes, but let's go ahead and reconvene and get this meeting engaged again. Our next case will be case number BZA 0724-00797 and will also be presented by Mr. Downey.
Mr. Downey. Mr.
All
Downey.
right. So, BZA case 0724-00797. The applicant and property owner,
Thank you, Mr. Dillon County Council, because I don't even-
Michelle and Jane
He's running.
he's running.
Trematozzi, are requesting a special exception to establish a short-term rental, extended home rental in the Doo-Wop-Wapu Overlay Low-Density R4 zoning district at 818 Castle Avenue, TMS number 53500200122 in the St. Andrews area of Charleston County. The subject property and properties to the north, south, west, and west are located in the Doo-Wop area overlay residential R4 zoning district. The properties to the east are located in the city of Charleston's jurisdiction. The property contains a single-family residence with 3 bedrooms that was constructed in 1950 per Charleston County records. The applicant would like to rent 2 bedrooms in the single-family residence and have shown 6 parking spaces on their site plan. The applicant letter of intent explains, we are proposing to use the property at 818 Castle as a short-term rental, extended home rental to offer renters a comfortable and functional place to reside for a short period of time. All right, so there is the definition of short-term rentals. The overlay map for the Doo-Wop-Wapu Overlay Zoning District. That is a zoning map of the subject property. The 300-foot radius map. An aerial view of the subject property, and a zoomed-in aerial view of the subject property. Staff conducted its site visit on August the 23rd, 2024. The single-family residence and the proposed parking. Some of the surrounding properties, and Castle Avenue. That is the site plan and the tenant notice, the plat of the property. So staff believe that all 3 of the criteria for this application may have been met. So the Board of Zoning Appeals may approve with conditions, or deny BZA case 0724-00797, special exception to establish a short-term rental, extended home rental in the Doo-Wop-Wapu Overlay Low-Density R4 zoning district at 818 Castle Avenue, TMS number 35002000122 in the St. Andrews area of Charleston County, based on the BZA's finding of facts, unless additional information is deemed necessary to make an informed decision. The board may modify any of staff's recommended conditions below by including but not limited to restricting the number of days that the short-term rental may be rented. In the event that the board decides to approve this application, the board should consider the following recommendations by staff. Prior to the zoning permit approval, the applicant shall complete the limited site plan review process. The use shall comply with all requirements of Article 6.8. The property shall not be used for more than 144 days in aggregate during any calendar year, and the property owner shall be responsible for ensuring that the tenants comply with the Charleston County noise ordinance. Are there any questions of staff?
Board members, do you have any questions for Mr. Downey? That may be a first.
That
Mr.
is a
Downey.
first.
I mean, all right. Well, then we shall open it up for public comment. Was the applicant present? If you would, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and tell us why we should approve your application.
My name is Michelle Trementozzi, and I reside at 475 Lake Ridge Boulevard in Somerville, South Carolina. My husband and I purchased 814 Castle, which is right next door to 818 Castle, when his mom was alive. So we had both houses right next to each other. And she passed away about 6 months after we bought both houses for the both of us. And we have stayed at 814 Castle up until July, and we just moved to Somerville for my daughter because she's in a private school up there. So And right now, we have 818 being rented as a long-term rental. And since she passed in September of 2021, we started renting it in November as a long-term rental, and we have been doing so since then. And we have somebody there now that'll be there through, they're signing a new lease for January of 2025 through the end of the year. So this really wouldn't be until 2026. We just made the agreement with them in the past 2 weeks. We really like them as tenants. They're going to pay a little bit extra, and they're going to stay for another year. So we would like to do a short term. I'm also a real estate agent as well. And I have parents who come to visit a lot, so it'd be nice for them to stay there for some time. They're both retired, and then I could rent it out for the other 144 days to, other people who are looking to move here, plus somewhere to stay short term, or just visitors. It's in a great location. As you all know, it's inside 526. They're building, another really nice commercial property there, right where 17 and Wapuu connect. So it'll be a nice area for people that are coming to visit. But we don't plan on using it until 2026 for an extended home rental.
All right, thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Trementozzi. Is
Yes,
that right? All
yes.
right. Mr. Martin, you have a question?
I have a question maybe for staff or council, but if we approve this in calendar year 24, do they have to come back in 25 to get isn't it an annual extension or something? How does that work?
No, sir. So once the special exception has been approved on the property, the special exception runs with the property. The applicant has, I believe, 1 year to to get the permits. Once they have the permits in place, as long as it renews every year, they're good to go. I have a property that I can think of now that has not rented in almost 3 or 4 years, but they keep the renewal up every year just in the interim that they want to. Yep.
Do we have questions for the applicant? All right, Mr. Seidel.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your comments. You mentioned that you own 2 houses and you own one of the houses to one side. Have you spoken to the neighbor on the other side about your interest in doing a short-term rental of the property, which may feel different to them than long-term rental, which they're more familiar with?
Actually, I have. He was supposed to leave a comment. He's a good friend of ours. His name's Tony, and he was like, "I'll leave a positive comment," but I didn't see any of those. So maybe he didn't, but he is completely fine with it being rented as a short term. Yes, sir.
And will you be using an agency or to handle the short-term rental? What is your plan there?
I'll be handling it on my own. I'm being in real estate. I know how to work. I mean, it just depends. I think if we get to the point that we're really busy and I can't handle it, I'll probably get a company, probably through my brokerage that can handle it, doing the property management. But we, owning the house next door, we do have outdoor cameras, and when we do a short term on this one, we're going to add them to that property as well.
I'm sorry, and just one final question, if I may. Will you be willing to give your contact information to the neighbors surrounding there in case there's any issue with a short-term rental that may come up that they're aware of and would be able to contact you in that case?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yep, we've been living there almost 3 years, so we know all the neighbors. The street, they're all half-acre lots on the street. It's very quiet. So it's mostly owned by owners. There are a few renters that are in there, but it's a very close-knit street. We all know each other. They all seen the public hearing notice that's been put on the property, and nobody's had any objections.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Seidel. Are there any other questions for the applicant? All right, well, thank you for your testimony
Okay,
tonight.
thank you.
Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? All right, no one else to speak in favor. Is there anyone else here to speak in opposition to this application? Does not appear there's anyone else to speak in opposition of any application that might be here tonight. We'll figure that out as we go along. All right, well, thank you. We'll close this case to the public, and I'll ask the board members if they have any other questions of staff. If not, then we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Mr. Marchant, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In case BZA-07-24-00797, I move to approve as I believe it meets all three criteria. Number one, it is compatible with existing uses in the vicinity and will not adversely affect the general welfare or character of the immediate community. As the applicant stated, they have two rentals now. They do not believe any of their neighbors would be opposed to this. And being friendly with all their neighbors certainly helps in that case. And so I believe it meets criterion number one. Criterion number two, it looks like they've made adequate provisions for items such as setback, parking, buffering, traffic, noise, et cetera. Certainly as the time gets closer and the long-term rental moves out, they will have to adhere to that. But based on the testimony in the application, they've made adequate provisions and meet criteria number two. In criteria number three, it complies with all applicable rules, regulations, and laws related to the ZELDAR and applicable to SCRP site plan review requirements of this ordinance. In addition to those three criteria, this motion includes the considerations and the conditions as recommended by staff, all four. This ends my motion, Mr. Chairman.
So we have a motion made by Mr. Marchant and a second by Mr. Seidel. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous. There are none opposed. Motion passes. Congratulations. Your request has been granted. You'll receive a final decision via certified mail from staff within 10 working days. If you have any questions in the next step, please contact staff. Thank you very much for your time this evening. All right. Moving to the next case, Mr. Downey is presenting BZA 0724-00798.
All right, so
Is that right? 799, I'm sorry.
798.
798.
Yep, 798.
I had it right.
All right, so BZA case 0724-00798, the applicant and property owner Bradley Flagg is requesting a special exception to establish a short-term rental, extended home rental in the low-density manufactured housing subdivision at 1658 Turns Nest Road, TMS number 33107000171 on James Island. The subject property and adjacent properties to the east are located in the low-density manufactured housing subdivision. The properties to the west and south are located in the city of Charleston's jurisdiction. North of the subject property is a retention pond. The property contains a single-family residence with 4 bedrooms that was constructed in 2023 per Charleston County records. The request is to rent 1 bedroom for up to 144 days. The applicant's letter of intent says, I have been renting out 1 bedroom in my home as a licensed limited home rental and would like to obtain the extended home rental permit. So again, that is the definition of short-term rental. The subject property, the 300-foot radius map, aerial views, and zoomed out aerial views. So staff conducted a site visit on August the 23rd, 2024. That is the single-family residence and the parking. Some of the surrounding properties in the neighborhood. That is Turns Nest Road. A site plan of the property. The tenant notice. The tenant notice and the site plan showing the parking. And the tenant notice showing the evacuation routes in case of an emergency. The plat of the property. So staff believes for this application, all 3 of the criteria may have been met. So the Board of Zoning Appeals may approve with conditions, or deny BZA case 0724-00798, a special exception to establish a short-term rental, extended home rental in the low-density manufactured housing subdivision at 1658 Turnsnest Road, TMS number 33107000171 on James Island in Charleston County, based on the BZA's finding of fact, unless additional information is deemed necessary to make an informed decision. The board may modify any of staff's recommended conditions below by including, but not limited to, restricting the number of days that the property may be used as a short-term rental. In the event that the board decides to approve the application, the board should consider the following recommended conditions by staff. Prior to the zoning permit approval, the applicant shall complete the limited site plan review process. The use shall comply with all requirements of Article 6.8. The property shall not be used for more than 144 days in aggregate during any calendar year, and the property owner shall be responsible for ensuring that the tenants comply with the Charleston County Noise Ordinance. Before the question period, Mr. Seidel, I want you to know that there are several short-term rentals in this neighborhood. This is one of the neighborhoods why our planning director says I have a job. So, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. And you do a fantastic job at it, too.
Well, thank you, sir.
All
Any
right.
further questions?
Board, any questions for Mr. Downey? Mr. Seidel, are you satisfied?
He preempted.
All right, thank you, Mr. Downey. Is the applicant present? Would you please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and tell us why we should approve the application?
Good afternoon, BZA. I'm Brad Flagg. I am the primary resident and owner of the house. If you saw from some of the pictures, you would notice the GPS of just an empty lot. Actually, we built the house there. I actually worked hand in hand with short-term rental, knowing that in order for us to live there, this is kind of how we had to make it work. I knew about this lot because I lived next door in the condos for 7 years. And the gentleman that owned the lot, his daughter lives next door. He was comfortable vetting it to me, knowing that I was going to build a house there and exactly what my intention was. He just asked that if he could stay some weeks, and he would be okay with that to see his daughter. I live there. This is my primary residence. My wife lives there, my 3-year-old, my 6-month-old, my retired police captain father-in-law, and my mother-in-law. So we're comfortable with the guests being there. There's a ton of rentals back in the neighborhood, and I can sympathize with anyone's argument that says we don't want commercial here in our neighborhood because it brings extra people. I'm at the front of the neighborhood. My neighbors are 84 condos and 36 triplexes, so they shouldn't be able to make that argument against me that I'm causing mayhem to the neighborhood. It's quite the other way around. I may not exceed 72 days as it is, but I wanted to have the 144 just in case it's something in the future is no longer offered to us. I'm sure you're getting a lot of short-term rental questionnaires. It's obvious to me after being up here today that eventually something's going to come down the line where regulation has to fall in place. I'm just trying to make this work. I'm trying to stay above board. I don't want to get in trouble, and that's why I'm here today.
Thank you, Mr. Flagg. Mr. Neal, you have a question for the applicant?
Just a quick question. I applaud you for having so many family members and fathers and mother-in-laws and things like that. That seems the way the communities and the world is moving, so I applaud you for planning for that. I'm just curious on the layout of the house. It looked like there was a guest house behind the house and then the main house with the numerous bedrooms. Where is the bedroom? Will it fluctuate all the time, or are you do one of the guest house bedrooms?
For all intensive purposes, let's just call it an accessory dwelling.
There you
It's
go.
connected. It's connected to the house because by code, that was what was dictated. When I spoke
Right.
with short term, we had to connect it for the same roof line. So in order to keep wife happy, father-in-law happy, everybody on board, we wanted to make it as separate as possible while we still connected it. So we designed it just to keep 2 people. It's a single bedroom. We vet everyone that comes through because I have skin in the game there also. If something goes wrong, I'm right next door. It's been kind of an experiment at this phase. I have a service that runs it for me. We've had no problems with it, no issues at all. And they've asked me, they said, we really could do more days. But this, again, is our first season. Things have slowed down right now. I'm under the 72. I don't know that I'll need more than 72, but I just want to be proactive and get ahead of this.
Just for clarity, so it's basically the room over the garage or the room over
Yes.
it's that guest house on the plat that we saw?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. That's very clear. Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? All right, well, thank you for your testimony this evening. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone here to speak in opposition to this application? All right, well, we will close this case to the public, and I will ask the board if they have any other questions of staff. No questions of staff, so how about let's entertain a motion?
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Just wanted to let you know that there were 2 letters in opposition submitted in your packet for this case.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Downey. So, board, we need a motion.
I'll make a motion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trueslow.
In the BZA case 072400798, I move that we approve the application. This is governed by Zelda Article 6, and in particular 6.1.3. I incorporate by reference on my basis the responses 1 through 3 to 6.8.2C, and I'm just repeating what's required by law as the basis. Number one, this is compatible with the existing uses in the community. I'm mindful of the opposition, but nonetheless, a persuasive case has been made. I incorporate again by reference 2 and 3, adequate provisions for such things as setbacks and bufferings have been made, and this complies with all applicable rules and regulations. In making this motion, I would make this conditioned upon compliance with the provisions that there be adherence to the 4 staff recommendations.
Thank you.
I think that says it succinctly.
All right. Second. All right, we have a second from Mr. Marchant. So we have a motion that has been properly made and seconded. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There any opposed? No. Motion carries unanimously. So congratulations, your application has been approved. So you will receive a written notification via certified mail from staff within 10 working days of the next steps in the process. Thank you for your time this evening. All right, I believe this is our final case for the evening. It's case number BZA 072400800. And Mr. Downey is again up for something that's in my neck of the woods. So.
Yes, this is Johns Island. So, BZA case 072400800. The applicant and property owner, Ginger R. Summer of Joe Summers Landscape Construction, Inc., the treehouse, represented by David Tublin of Tublin Construction and Kevin Wally Architecture, SC, LLC, are requesting a variance to reduce the landscape buffer to reduce the required landscape buffers at 849 Main Road, TMS number 28200000128 on Johns Island in Charleston County. The subject property and adjacent properties are located in the Main Road Corridor Boulevard Main Commercial BMC zoning district. More specifically, the applicant is requesting a variance request to reduce the 8-foot perimeter landscape buffer required along the northeast and west property lines for an existing parking and existing structures, and to reduce the required 75-foot right-of-way buffer along Main Road by 42 feet to 33 feet. The property is currently in the site plan review process, ZSPR 0420000460. The 2.06 acre subject property contains an existing shed and existing metal canopy. That are located in the required perimeter buffer. The existing treehouse building is located within the required 75-foot right-of-way buffer along Main Road. So here are the ZLDR for Section 5.1 15, the Main Road Corridor Boulevard Commercial Zoning District, along with Section 9.4.3, the loading and the vehicular use landscape areas. This is a zoning map of the overlay zoning district. This is the subject property on the zoning map, the 300-foot radius map, an aerial view of the subject property, along with a zoomed out aerial view of the subject property. So staff did conduct its site visit on August the 23rd, 2023. So some pictures of the subject property. So here's this landscape plan 1, landscape plan 2, the plat of the property. So as far as the criteria are concerned, staff believe that it meets criteria 1, 2, 3, 5, and 5, and it may meet criteria 4, 6, and 7. So the Board of Zoning Appeals may approve with conditions, or deny BZA case 07-24-00800, a variance to reduce the required landscape buffers at 849 Main Road, TMS number 282-0000-128 on Johns Island in Charleston County, based on the BZA's finding of facts, unless additional information is deemed necessary to make an informed decision. In the event that the board decides to approve the application, staff recommendations are below. The applicant shall satisfy all conditions and approvals outlined in the site plan review project status reported dated March the 7th, 2024. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Downey. I'm going to start with Mr. Williams down here.
This may be a question for the applicant, but they want to reduce the 8-foot perimeter landscape. Is there a reduction amount? Like, how much do they want to reduce it? They wanted to.
Yeah,
that would be a question more specifically for the applicant.
It's in there.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Neal?
Yeah, I need to take a step back and understand, and this might be more for the applicant, so I'm trying to get them ready, but by the existing pictures, there's a lot still there. There's a shed still there. There's a metal building, it looks like there, and everything backing up that's already in place on Main Road. So I'm trying to understand what we're doing here that's bringing the necessity for trying to get a variance. So I'm trying to understand what they're doing. So anything you can bring light on that will preempt my asking the applicant.
So long story short, speaking plainly, there's several buildings that do not have permits. Some of those buildings are in the landscape buffer area, and so they're asking to reduce the landscape buffer area to bring those buildings into compliance.
So we're in non-compliance right now with a lot of the stuff.
Correct.
And what triggered the non-compliance? Or
I believe that the applicant was applying for something else, and then in the process,
it became apparent.
This came apparent that there were other issues.
Okay, and are they adding parking, or are they just putting in designated parking and stuff like that?
That would be a question for the applicant.
No problem, I'll hold it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Are there any other questions for staff? Mr. Williams?
Follow up to the question down here. The Zeldar, was it established before they owned the property, or?
Some of the structures on the property are considered legal non-conforming. So one of the main building that's on Main Road, if you drive down Main Road, the main building that is there, from my understanding, is legal non-conforming. Some of the other structures that have been added over time were there to aesthetically please where the structures were, and they currently don't meet the buffer requirements for this article. My application for this, from my understanding, working with a staff member who explained this process to me this morning.
To Mr. Downey, you have not had the privilege of working on this one.
No, I did not have the privilege of working on this one.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Downey? All right, thank you. Oh, Mr. Marchant.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. So if I understand correctly, if we approve the buffer changes, then the non-complying structures will be compliant, or or do we still have setback issues there?
No, so the non-compliant structures will then have the ability to apply for permits where they currently are.
Okay. So
that would make them compliant.
All right.
Yep.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Marchant. Any other questions for staff? All right, thank you, Mr. Downey. Is the applicant present? If you would please come forward and state your name and address for the record and tell us why we should approve this application.
Good evening. I'm David Tomlin, 716 Fort Sumter Drive. I'm a local landscape architect, and I have my clients here, Joe and Ginger Summers, and also our architect, Kevin Whaley, with Architecture Plus. Treehouse has been, they purchased the original property back in 2006 and went under operation as a home and garden shop, if you're familiar with that area. The original block building up front was the old gas station on Main Road. So they started their business in that block building and slowly expanded, built the metal building behind that, got that permitted, and as garden shops do, build gazebos and other things while they're, you have also got a huge 50-inch live oak tree on it, so, you know, doing things around that site. On the left side of this property, we've got the fire station. It's splitting between the fire station and our property is a big drainage easement. It's got a big ditch that runs through it that Joe, who's also a landscaper, maintains. And then on the back side and the right side of the adjacent properties are owned by Joe and Ginger. They're tossing around plans that might become a nursery, a cohesive use of all the, you know, their garden shop and that. So across the street, we've got the tomato shed, the restaurant, and on one of our exhibits, with this main road overlay buffer, one of our exhibits identified there's within a half a mile, there's probably, I think we identified 9 other properties that, you know, have things within this 75-foot landscape buffer, whether it's existing parking or in this case, the old gas station that, you know, it's not something unique for our property. And that 75-foot buffer, that's one of our major items because operating into that original building, they've got their parking, they've got some of their other, you know, retail sales. You walk around this property and it's full of retail pots and plants and everything else. And then along with that, we've got that 8-foot perimeter buffer. And over the years, as they developed this business, they've built some gazebos and some trellises that, as staff noted, were not permitted. They did not pull construction permits on. So when the county identified all this, our client approached the county and said, you know, what do we need to do? The county asked for this entire property be brought up to current zoning. That's landscaping, that's your parking, defined parking, that's also stormwater. One of the weird things we found out when we entered all this, the original construction did not, the original general contractor did not close out his stormwater. So we immediately had to, our client hired me, hired Kevin, also hired Bowman Engineering to go down what's been a 4-year journey of applying for plans and approvals. And so within last 3 months, we've finally gotten site plan and stormwater permitting. And our next step was these non-compliant, the 75, reduction to 75-foot buffer, also the items that we're showing that are existing within that perimeter buffer. And the rest of the perimeter buffer, we're showing on landscape plans to provide all the planting wherever there is not these two structures where Joe keeps his tractor in the back, and along the fire department side where they built a little gazebo with pots and things underneath it, is to provide all that perimeter buffering. Now, one of the items that y'all brought up was this, our next step after this, if you approve this, we've got to start working with the building department on permitting those structures. We've gone ahead and reached out to the building department and already started some initial conversations. And what they've indicated to us is, we think there's a roadmap to it. We're going to have to get you to start testing your compaction and also show that you don't have termites and it's under a termite bond. So we've already started that process. So if we, today, it started with get site plan approval, which we've gotten. If we can get our 2 variances tonight, then we go back to the building department to get those built structures approved, plus we enter into a construction project to bring all the items that we got on our approved plans built, and then we're compliant. And if we have our
Mr. Tomlin, so
Yes, sir.
thank you so much for your testimony. I'm sure we're going to have some questions as we go through tonight, but for clarification, just so I know I understand, there's one structure on the northern property line adjacent to the fire station that's right near the entrance to the property.
Yes.
And then 2 structures that are carport/equipment sheds on the back side of the property along the common property line with the owners.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, but everything else was in compliance in terms of zoning setback, buffer requirements, et cetera.
The landscape plan that we're showing right now is bringing all these other things. We got to get in a construction project to get all that, and we've got approved plans to go down that road. These are the only things that, hey, they're existing. It's been there, and that's what we're asking for. Is there a roadmap to allow those?
Okay.
Or as my applicant, Ginger Summers, said, I guess I'll get my chainsaw out.
I mean, worst comes to worst, you're moving the sheds. So you know that.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Williams, you have a question.
Yes, sir. So the 8-foot buffer, how much of a reduction would you need for that?
On the northern side, and I wish I had a pointer.
One.
Okay. We've got that one shed that we're showing the picture of right there. And then you'll see all that planting that runs along above our 50-inch oak. That's all we're providing. We've got a little bit of our outfall for our storm drainage that gets into that ditch. Then we come along our back property line. We're providing planting up to where Joe's got his couple of little metal sheds that he keeps his tractors and everything in. And then across that southern boundary is where that's full landscaping that we're going to be planting.
So so in other words, you're supposed to have a 8-foot perimeter buffer.
Yes, sir.
How many feet are you going to be able to maintain out of those 8 feet for buffer? Is it 0 or 2 feet, 1 feet?
In those
how much of a buffer?
two spots, it's going down to 0.
Okay.
But we felt like since on the northern side, we've got the fire station with that big green ditch, that's okay, and it's not an eyesore. And then along the back property, since it's Joe and Ginger's land.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Neal?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 2 questions. One on the perimeter landscaping, mainly focusing on the north corner, I guess. I'm terrible with directions, but behind that shed. So you would reduce that perimeter landscape area in there from 8 feet to 0, but not put any buffer, not put any landscaping on the back side. I guess there's a ditch there we're talking about?
That ditch, that top of the line of that ditch almost comes straight up. It's
Okay, well, that's fine.
You know, if you could have planted something.
Yeah, I'm not worried about a landscaping plan there. I was just curious. So if that's where the 0 is, all the way basically around the perimeter, then the second variance you're asking for is to reduce the required 75-foot right-of-way buffer along Main Road reduce it by 42 down to 33. So I'm guesstimating that the 33 feet is on the middle section of the middle building. Is that where
Yes.
the 33 feet is what's left?
Yeah, basically what's existing right now is they've got a containment fence so that, they can secure the property. And what we're doing is taking all the planting that's required in the 75-foot and getting it into that front area.
But it's fair to say that only that one small area is at 33 feet, where the rest of it is actually larger behind it where you have the new plantings.
In the front.
I'm trying to understand. Maybe we should look at this. I'm looking at, right here is 33 feet, but over here is larger?
No, that's 33 feet right there, because the piece that sticks out is that what did staff say?
Legal non-conforming.
Legal
use.
non-conforming.
But you're asking for the 33 feet all the way up and down, correct?
And showing all that planting, where we stop all that planting is at that 33 feet.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm fine, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. We have other questions for the applicant? Wow, I'm a little surprised, so I guess you did a good job.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification from the last question. So the existing retail and storage building is a grandfathered building. We all agree with that, right? Is there a flanking building coming off the south of that is setting that 33 feet, or is it just a fence?
No, you're hitting on it. Those are outdoor trellises, open things. And so it's kind of to keep that old building working and kind of in character is you put retail stuff around it. So.
Right, okay. So the 33 feet is governed by the existing trellis, whatever, that flanks the non-conforming permitted structure, correct? Okay.
Yes, and their security fence, which kind of says everything's in here.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I do
Mr.
have
Neal.
one. There was a comment in the public comments about Main Road going to 4 lanes. Is there any? I know the area, but I don't know the history of what's going on there. Is there any? Is this going to be impacted by any of that, or if it were to happen?
You hear rumor that eventually they're going to go 4-lane, which that front building, if they start acquiring right-of-way, that existing non-conforming building may be part of it.
Right.
And it would be unfortunate, but...
You just see where it is.
See where it is.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Tomlin, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for your time. Sure. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application?
Good evening. My name's Kevin Wally. I'm with Architecture Plus. I just wanted to thank the staff for all the hard work they've done over the last 4 years. If you could pull back the site plan, I just want to clarify 2 points. As David said, the original building is the small cinder block building that they purchased with the land, and then they permitted the large building to the right, about 4,000 square feet. It was a pre-engineered metal building, and all the parking was coordinated in between those 2 structures. And so that imaginary 75-foot line kind of falls in that middle of that area. And so that's why it really was not possible to adhere to the 75-foot buffer. And in fact, Joe and Ginger, when they first operated the business, had landscaped the front of the business because Joe was selling plants at the time, and Ginger selling indoor and outdoor plant material, and people came by and stole all their material. So this is the second time now that they're coming back and doing this. So most importantly, the cinder block building was existing, grandfathered, as you said. The 4,000 square foot building was permitted properly. During the business growing, the shade sheds, as Ginger called them, were added to put product underneath them. And the stormwater came up, and it became about a 2-year study to adhere to the current regulations. There was a lot of concern about the oak tree. And at this point, we're working within the confines of the east property line, the west property line, north and south. And so we've spent 4 years getting all this approved through the staff. We got site plan approval, and now we're just looking for these few variances. I've met with Hakeem Bayoud of the building department twice, looking at the areas where we need to get a post-construction permit. And as David said, we're going to get a soils test, and we're going to ensure there's no termite rot or anything like that, and then we're going to apply for those permits to be correct and proper. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley. Any questions for Mr. Wiley from the board? Mr. Williams?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Good, Ms. Williams.
What are what buildings are on the northeast and west property lines, neighboring to the shed, to these sheds?
On the east property line, there's 2 metal canopies. They're about 14 foot tall.
Well, no, I mean the property lines. What's on the other side of the property line?
The adjacent
land.
use. Yeah.
Just the land, and there's
It's
no
vacant
issue with
land
anybody.
It's vacant land that the Summers own.
So they own the land
Yes,
as well?
sir.
Okay, and they own the business as well, the
Yes.
buildings? Okay, thank you.
And to the north, there's a fire department, a newly
Correct.
constructed fire department building, right?
Right.
Any other questions for Mr. Wiley? All right, thank you so much for your time. Is there anyone else here to speak in favor of this application? I mean, it's your last chance. You are the last 2 people here. Do you want to speak for your own project, or?
No, they tired too.
I'm Ginger Summers. I own it, and it's my fault that we're even here because I built the shade shed, the lean-tos. And
She's a little emotional.
slightly. So basically, I went to county probably in probably 2015, and I was trying to get an approval for a young lady to put a little coffee shop on the property to sell coffee and danishes, and she had done all her homework with DHEC, and I basically opened a can of worms with the sheds that I had built. My son-in-law built them for me. He's a contractor by trade, and he did all the work himself. I went to a couple of builders that I asked if I needed to have permits, and they told me no because they were open air sheds, and I went with it and had one done, then moved and did the other and did another, and never had them permitted. And that was 2015, and in 2019, when I went before county to see if I could get the permit for the young lady to do the coffee shop, found out that I had done all this and should not have done it without permit. So everything kind of retroed back, and now I'm trying to get permits to get it all cleared up.
Well, thank you, Ms. Summers. It sounds like you're getting close to the close of the process. So.
I hope so.
Are there any questions for Ms. Summers? All right, thank you so much for coming up.
Thank you very
providing
much.
that. All right, is there anyone else here to speak? There's no one else here to speak unless you would like to speak, sir. So.
I'm Joe Summers, 46 years of marriage. If you drive by this property, you'll notice that it's probably one of the nicest looking pieces of property all the way down to Kiowa from Savannah Highway. And it's been well landscaped already up to now because we like to have a first-class operation there. And it just so happened that sheds got built. We now just want to take and get this thing through. It's been a 5-year process, 4-year process, and we like to just be able to do business legally and straight up. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Summers. Any questions? All right, is there anyone else here to speak in favor? That would be no, because there's no one else here to speak. And is there anyone else here to speak in opposition? I'm going to assume that's a no as well. All right, this case is closed to the public. Board members, do you have any additional questions of staff? There are no questions for staff. So is there a motion on this matter that is before us?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
I'll make a motion to approve this request. You want me to say the criteria first, or all the criteria?
Yeah, you got to go through why it meets the criteria.
Thanks. I do believe it meets criteria 1. There are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. As the applicant's letter of intent states, the north perimeter buffer is adjacent to an existing grass drainage easement, so that meets that criteria. I believe it meets criteria 2 because these conditions do not generally apply to other properties in the vicinity. They don't apply to other properties in the vicinity, as the staff explains, that it meets this criteria. Criteria 3, because of these conditions, the application of this ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict utilization of the property. They do have an existing business with sheds that is existing on the property, and just hearing the testimony, they own the neighboring property as well, so it's not going to be a hindrance to the neighboring property either. Number 4, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to the adjacent property or to the public good. For the testimony we heard, once again, we haven't heard too many people opposing this request. Number 5, the Board of Zoning Appeals shall not grant a variance to the effect of which would be to allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted in this zoning district. This zoning district does permit them to have a business in this location. Number 6, the need for the variance is not the result of the applicant's own actions. As we heard in the testimony, the past shed was put on. They made a lot of changes to keep the previous buildings. There was a gas station, and so they made all efforts to comply, and now they're making all efforts to comply with the current regulations as it stands. Number 7, granting the variance does not substantially conflict with the comprehensive plan or the purposes of the ordinance. It does not conflict with the comprehensive plan. And I just want to say, just hearing the testimony from the applicants and everybody, it does sound like they want to comply with all the ordinances, taking into account the history of this property and the fact that there was an existing gas station that they kept on the property. So that's why I believe it does meet all 7 criteria.
Mr. Williams, does your motion include the one special condition recommended by staff?
Yes, and include the one additional recommendation by staff.
All right, thank you. Second. All right, we have a second by Mr. Jordan. All right, we have a motion that's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? There being no discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? There being none opposed, the motion passes unanimously. So your request has been granted. You'll receive a final decision from staff via certified mail within 10 working days, and they will let you know the next steps in the process. So thank you so much for your patience in going through this long process.
Thank you all.
All right, Miss Working.
Bring their husbands and wives. And credit card.
So for October, we have 5 new business cases. We will schedule the 2 old ones as well. Those were the 2 that you guys heard in August. The Edisto Pool and the Womala Bardominium. Did I say barn? I meant barn and barn.
Yeah, Barnominium.
The barominium.
I got a question.
On the old cases, we don't have, is public comment back up? I mean, we reopened everything, or we already had the testimony and everything?
We do. I mean, the chair at his discretion could circumvent testimony that's already been heard. It is part of the
Yeah.
record now.
I mean, because we had a lot of people that were going crazy on that pool.
Yeah. We
And
did, but there were some, I think the case on Wadmalaw, there were folks that did not speak as well, so.
Yeah, but I mean, since we didn't vote it, we only voted to defer, so it's a new case, like Mr. Marchand, who wasn't here, he'll vote, I mean, all of that, right?
Right.
Great.
Yeah, because we will have, I mean, assuming Jesse and Mark are here, then they haven't heard it yet, those 2 cases, so
Yeah.
we kind of have to do a quick
Read up.
So deferred.
but it still should, in theory, go faster this time.
Mr.
In
Jordan?
theory.
Just a historical question, but since I'm one of the newbies around here, before this short-term and long-term rental thing came to be such a big deal, what was the big thing on this board then? Trees? What was
Oh,
this?
yeah. Trees, mines.
Yeah.
Mines, yeah.
Everything else that you hear, those were big deals.
I mean, it seemed like this rental thing is just
Alcohol
taking over
sales,
big time. in the-
tattoos.
I guess whole across the state, I guess.
Mobile homes. I mean, it's just kind of changed with time.
Their old case?
The one Edisto Pool and then the tree variants.
The
on-
Edisto Pool, the one they already built.
Already
that
built,
one.
and then the.
She
tree
provided the
variants
information
on Lazy
today.
Creek, tree variants. On what?
What happens on that one if they're not approved and the things are already in the ground?
It has to be removed. Or they can appeal and
Just fill it in?
whatever. I mean, they could appeal whatever decision we make if they don't like it and go to circuit court and work it out there. All right,
So
Ms.
anyways,
Working, is there
Are you
anything
guys
else?
okay keeping it at 5, the normal time? It's not 10 cases.
What are the new cases?
Let's see, 2 SDRs, Betsy Kirsten and Walpoo Drive. A pool location and 2 like residential setbacks.
Okay.
Anything controversial, other than the Wadmalaw and
Okay,
Edisto
Mr.
stuff?
Evans. He asks me that every Monday. Like, well, we've had times people show up and we have no
Yeah,
idea. But
true.
nothing that I foresee. How about that? That's the best I can answer that question, except for the old business that you've, you know.
We can do a 4:30?
You want to do 4:30?
I suggested it, I
Yeah.
don't know if we
I'm
we
good
can
with
take
it.
it,
We could do 4:30.
save a half hour
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah,
Get
that's
through all
fine.
the beat.
Yeah, I'm happy with 4:30.
I will actually be in New York.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
You were gonna
Part of
miss-
the problem, me being on the board.
You're gonna miss the pool.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to be gone too.
So Mr.
All right, anything else, Ms. Working?
That's it, and then just
Hold on.
Mr.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
haven't done your training, please do your training.
Miss Smalls.
Okay.
So 4:30.
I believe we have lost control of this meeting, so I'm going to go ahead and call and move that it's adjourned.
You know who you are if you're on the list.
Ms. Switzer Smalls, you've been called out for, you got to get your training done.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer.